usually do. What would be the next opportunity in terms of expanding the Chinese Manor House?
I probably can actually refer to my colleague Duncan Knox, because there's a potential change in speed limits, and I don't know if Duncan wants to come in on that.
Thank you. For those who don't know me, my name is Duncan Knox, Road Safety and Sustainable School Travel Team Manager, and it's the mission of my team to reduce death and injury on Surrey's roads and promote more walking and cycling to school. So we are currently working on a review of our 20-mile-an-hour speed limit policy, and we'll be bringing a report to Cabinet in the next month. And that's as much as I could say about it at this time.
Yeah, well, yes, I'd be interested. That's right. There will be some sort of proposed changes to the way that the cell operates, and they will go through the regulatory process first, the council or the through cabinet. But I think what Duncan is saying is that there is a much wider review now of the rollout of 20-mile zones across the county, and I'm sure that Farnham will be included in part of that review.
So this is Borelli Parkenstein. As I previously reported, this is a riverside shared cycle pedestrian footpath from South Street to Riverside car parks. It forms part of medium-term interventions, and it's one of the priority east-west routes in the elsewhere, which we're delivering early. However, for us to start the design, we require information on timing points from the developer Crest Nicholson, who's delivering the bridge. And the Surrey teams, which is major projects planning and property, and Waverley are pushing hard to ensure that the bridge is the correct dimensions and settings for Farnham. And it seems we're progressing with this improved design. But in the meantime, to move it forward, we're working on some upfront investigations on ecology and I'll try and say it, but it's trees. Surveys to inform the design. So we are moving on it. It's just going to be waiting for these targets.
Thank you again. Does that mean a planning application will, a revised planning application for the bridge will be coming to Waverley at some point soon?
Yeah, it's being discussed with Dawn White, but I don't think she's
online.
She's online, so it's more Dawn who. So yes, so we've seen some recent designs, and I know Farnham and Waverley have reviewed them as well. So we're hoping that it will be a revised application coming forward.
Yeah, I think it's there are another conversation. I mean, it's slightly complicated around planning basis. It's not and commission. So we would need various boundaries with that conversation in the future. But I know that there are local interested in the final design of that bridge and it's working towards that solution.
So moving on to the Water Lane roundabout, following the success of the way we facilitate the funding, the Water Lane roundabout improvements, which are just off the B for the 208 and the actual roundabout. Detailed designs now commenced with the Surrey Highways team, and we recently carried out some topographical surveys, and next we'll be on site to carry out some trial connection and utilities and drainage surveys. And also, early July, we'll be engaging with disability groups and doing more just to check with them and engaging with the localised business groups.
Obviously, the RTS thing that I put forward last year was pedestrian and cycling crossing to the north. Essentially, but you can't see this is going to be photographs of that. Just let you know that there is a public petition that's been raised for that that's going to the highways committee because it's a key pedestrian route, and also the the sight lines in Farnham do not currently include the walking and cycling sight lines. So if you try to use that crossing at the moment, there are a number of complaints that people can't see. And cyclists and pedestrians are having to walk out into the carriage place to use the crossing because they so that you're aware.
Thank you. Okay, so swiftly on to town centre improvements. So the team in the background have been working really hard on a lot of activities since the last board. We were tasked with carrying out some modelling on the options being underlined. And since then, so we have redesigned the Brightwell development drawings for the East Street section 278. They've been passed over to the planning teams. We carried out some design of key junctions, which was the purple area of the plan, which was discussed at the last board. We carried out some strategic traffic modelling on options, the hybrid options B and Y, and we've also carried out some similar modelling of which is the close and more detailed modelling of the hybrid options. The teams are going to discuss their findings shortly, but I'd like to start by drawing your attention to the optimised infrastructure plan and the vision that the people of Farnham signed up to. The key objectives of this were to rapidly reduce carbon emissions, ensure they are well-connected communities, support the economic vitality of Farnham, and improve the quality of place. Just as a reminder, nothing's been done in Farnham for a generation, and this scheme is making a town a better environment for the future generation and the climate challenge that we have. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, the Surrey Local Transport Plan, also called LTP4, was adopted in July 22, and it has a hierarchy of sustainable travel with prioritisation of walking and cycling over less sustainable modes, such as a car. I will now pass over to our design team and our modelling teams to give you a brief insight into the design and modelling outcomes. So I'll pass on to Gemma Joyner, who's on the call.
Hi everyone. Do you still have the slides there, or do you need me to share my screen? Brilliant. So the next slide, please.
Okay, thank you. So I will pass over to Gemma to talk about the strategic modelling shortly. But to start off with, just to summarise what has happened since the last board, I think Elaine's covered it in part, but just as a refresh. So we were asked to look at the design and modelling of two options, which was V and Y. V was called minimal change, perhaps a little bit of a misnomer, but minimal change perhaps on South Street and Union Road, but change on Victoria Road, East Street, and around the Worldly Junction. And Y was the option whereby there would be a two-way Woolmead Road, and East Street would be buses only, although we would still have delivery and servicing vehicles on East Street as well. So just to recap, that those were the two options. So in terms of design, what we've looked at is making the section of Downing Street between Lower Church Lane and Longbridge two-way working for traffic, instead of one-way as it is now. Reconsidering the footway widening or providing the footway that's missing on the north side of Victoria Road to provide better connections between Brightwells and the rest of the town. As I said, looking perhaps at limited change on South Street and Union Road, but to consider what could be done really at the South Street Union Road junction, to look at access restrictions and improved provision for active travel on Park Road, to also address some of the safety issues there with vehicles in listed buildings and so on. To look at Bear Lane in terms of just keeping the traffic levels at a sensible level and managing the conflict between vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists. As I said, looking at the two-way traffic on Woolmead Road with option Y. So that's on the design, and then as Elaine said, there's been two different types of model done. There's been what we call strategic traffic modelling, which is the big model of the whole of Surrey, which is really the tool that's used to understand where does the traffic go if you put these interventions in. And then we've used a smaller, more focused model for Farnham itself only, which is called Mechanics. It essentially looks at what happens when the traffic uses those new units. So that's just an overview. We move to the next slide, please. I'm going to touch on the design. So we're going to go through design and then the two different types of model. So on design, I think the drawings have been distributed to board members already. So if you've had a chance to look at them, perhaps they don't come across too well on the slides, but I'll just cover them anyway. So on the left-hand side there, we are showing Downing Street, Union Road, and Victoria Road. So what we've got there is the new two-way working that allows people to come to and from the Wagon Yard car park in the direction of Longbridge. We have Victoria Road with footway widening and a new piece of footway, because there isn't one at the moment, on the north side of Victoria Road, connects the car park and opens the rest of the town centre. We have a new junction, so traffic lights at the junction of Longbridge, Union Road, and Downing Street. That's traffic lights with some crossings for pedestrians, particularly of Longbridge and Union Road. And we have a minor improvement of South Street, Union Road, which is to ease the turning movement for large vehicles from South Street into Union Road. Because at the moment, I think that's where the type of the guardrail gets hit and not destroyed, but impacted. And we've so that should help from a safety point of view. We've insisted putting traffic lights there because we've had feedback from consultation that we will essentially put the 200 lights in. If we move to Park Road and Fair Lane,
We did that, just check whether anybody's got any questions or queries.
okay, I'm happy to be stopped if I'm moving too quickly. So moving to the right hand side of the slide there, which is showing Park Road and the top part of Fair Lane. So Park Road, the idea is to restrict traffic, but to continue to allow access for residents so that they get to their parking, but to have removable bollards so that through traffic is not permitted, and to therefore improve the environment for walking and cycling. We've got quite narrow streets and it has sort of brick walls adjacent to the carriageway. And on Bear Lane, we've looked at how we can encourage cycling one way or two way to try to connect, I suppose, to the provision on Park Road, but also potential routes coming forward in the wider area. So that's that part of the design. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Some question, yeah, you want me to?
Just in relation to the cycling provision, we've obviously talked about Bear Lane, which is about the conflict between vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists at some length. I think that where we had landed, I thought, was that we were going to have this be the northbound route for cyclists, and we were going to look at an alternative route southbound. Is that still the case? To avoid the conflict?
Yes, so the drawings aren't here, but we have been looking at how we connect. So it's that drawing there with High Park Road and South Park View, how we get cyclists potentially from South Park View to the north side of the wall. I think there's a bit more work to be done to understand how we then connect into the rest of the town centre.
We need to switch to the on this page.
Thank you, Chair. There's like some criticisms into meetings we had. Absolutely looking at the Bear Lane with the plan, and it's up South View and Farnham Park that lives there. It's tell you they get the Bristol Long Junction potentially linking through the leisure centre to pick up where it's all. So we'll have at least now routes through the roads will cover the north south from the Bear Lane.
But it does look as if there is a workable solution.
Right, sorry, the next slide then. So
Previous slide was showing elements of the comments about those options B and Y. So this slide is showing essentially the differences between B and Y. So B, as I said, retains the one-way traffic on East Street and retains as far as possible, pretty much all of it, the redesign East Street that was put together for the purposes of section 278 associated with the code. So what we've done is looked at how that ties in to the proposals for Woodland Beer, but we already developed in terms of footway behind the borough and improve crossings there. So that's option B. For option Y, so in this scenario, we have looked at how to make Woolmead Road two-way, what the changes that we then need to make to accommodate two-way traffic on Woolmead Road at the junction of Royal Beer, the changes at the other end of East Street, the junction of Belford Way, where we're proposing traffic lights with crossings for pedestrians. Again, trying to retain as much of the East Street section 278 scheme as possible, but that pretty much stays unchanged, but the use of it changes because it becomes buses only with some delivery and service vehicle access. So the traffic then will be substantially bigger. Okay. If we move to the next slide. So the final thing to say on the design. So for the last 3 months, we've effectively been looking at design, it feels like for half the town centre. Because we've been looking at that, the part of Down Street, South Street, Union Road, and East Street, and Woolmead Road. Of course, we still have the proposals for the rest of the town centre, which is the main part of Down Street, the Borough, and Castle Street. So it's just really a reminder of that. Using some of the images that we use for the consultation to say that overall, what the hybrid options are giving us are those wider payments for pedestrians, particularly to help people with wheelchair and pushchair, new and improved crossing points at various places, including the Royal here at the top of Downing Street, raised crossings at various streets, loading bays to make sure that loading doesn't block traffic as far as possible, and planting, greening, outside dining, and seating. And the last one, I think, is those shorter driving routes for people from North Farnham to get to the Hart car park and South Farnham to get to the Wagon Hart car park, because we've made part of Borough two-way and we've made part of Downing Street two-way. As well as shorter driving routes, that helps us reduce the level of traffic on the parts of the current railway system. People don't have to go all the way round, but if they simply get a shortcut, that way. But
just pause there and see if anybody's already. They'll be online.
Thanks, I just wanted to comment on one thing. The first thing that's going to happen in practice is going to be these street walks actually to help the Brownhill scheme. And that's the reason Brownhill's board has agreed that couldn't happen this year. If you look at the time scale, the new planning application that we're going to do public consultation and so on. So we can't do this before Christmas. It's actually a big thing, actually. Because the town recently suffered a tremendous amount of disruption, nothing to do with anything we're doing here, but because of utility lots of lots in West Street, and the structure of Farnham is such that if you close any of the main roads coming in and out of the town, you cause enormous disruption. So I just wanted to point out that when we do get round to these street blocks, which will be sometime in the end of part of next year, the actual mitigation that has to be pretended to minimise the disruption of the town is extremely important, because with the West Street blocks, as Michaela will no doubt confirm, the retailers suffered enormously. Unfortunately, there's compensation available on things like multi-blocks, but there isn't actually any compensation available for retailers for this type of block. So we need to be extremely careful on how we plan this, and look for mitigation measures. And recent meeting of the Farnham Council, I won't go into the detail here, we came up with 1 or 2 ideas of how we could possibly mitigate it. So we want to talk to the team about it. There's time to plan all of this because it's not going to happen for next year. It's going to be the first thing that the public is going to see on the ground in relation to this scheme. So managing it to minimise the disruption to everybody is going to be extremely important.
Yeah.
I have to concur with Councillor Cloud. We actually mitigation built into the plan. So the mitigation is there, not to be done, and then we say, oh my God, the traffic's awful. We need mitigation built on that plan. Thank you.
So I think, I mean, you go, but I think, yeah, there's an absolute recognition of with MPG today, I mean, it's a part of just what, you know, any works, you know, the chaos and causes. So I think what I think is being offered from the Farnham Council is for me to put into you know, whatever mitigation is possible. But I think, you know, I think it is important that the you know, people in this room you know, have that opportunity to sit down with the team and have to plan through that. I don't think that's a problem today. So,
Jeremy's going to have it. Jeremy.
oh yeah, sorry, where are you going?
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. Look, I think it's tremendous progress. I just didn't quite catch from that, and apologies if you said it and I just missed it, but this looks terrific to me. I would always lean to being the bolder approach if there's any choices, but I think everyone knows that. But I do understand we have to be pragmatic as well. But I just wondered, what's the timings for the sort of consultation with the public? Could someone just tell me what that is?
Yes, so we will start, it's kind of a method approach we go through. So I'll talk about it later, but we'll start engaging with businesses earlier. Obviously, you know, send some stuff through to Surrey members and find board, hopefully, to give us a little bit of input about how their businesses work and how, you know, we can kind of mitigate any problems of loading, etc., and diversion routes. We'll also be starting some early engagement with our contractor. So hopefully it'll be our term contractor, but depending on the costs, we might go out to other contractors to get it done as well. So, and we've got disability. We've got quite a raft of meetings going to be starting to kind of build that narrative, so I can report back when we will start to sort of put these construction phase plans, etc., together. So we need a little bit of background work before we get to give dates, really, Jeremy.
Well, I'm assuming that's not this side of the summer, but will be in the autumn. Yeah. Yeah. Right, sorry, the capital was first.
All the board meeting, the three Surrey County councillors obviously shared some initial thoughts on what phasing mitigations might be required, because our inboxes are certainly burning very hot because of works on Love Street, so the very least. But we're obviously also very keen to ensure that we all start to work together. There are obviously things that will need to happen at the Waverley level, there are things that need to happen at the Farnham level. There's maintenance of existing walking and cycling routes. We need to make sure that, you know, we're doing to make sure that some of those mitigations are in place. And I do think the phasing, and I think Andy is absolutely right. You know, we've sent through some initial thoughts as to what mitigations might be used for East Street. I really would like to get something in the diary this side of Christmas and have those initial discussions. Because if we don't start planning now, these things will not be in the stagecoach plan for next year. They won't be Waverley's plan, it won't be a farm plan, it won't be a Surrey plan. So you know, I just would like to get a date in the diary sooner rather than later and start to look at, you know, a holistic way rather than just get to something. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
No, thank you, Tim. With both political and funding uncertainties in the not too distant future for all of us, this there is the potential for this project to become a race against time. So in volunteering our help as the 5 farm councillors on this board, we're not trying in any way to stand in the way of implementation. And assuming it's important that you have that necessary to provide the funding for option B, there is another way in which the members, the Farnham members of this board, can help speed the rate of progress. And that's by involving us in the final stages of option B before it comes back to the next board meeting. This would save time and it would save budget, because the good news is that the 5 farming councillors do not charge.
Nothing comes for free, Lisa. Yes, I mean, there is a paper going to cabinets, to remind me, is that June or July?
Yes, it's 27th of June, so the report to go to cabinet to draw down on capital for the scheme delivery.
So certainly from a Surrey County Council perspective, the funding is, it will be in place and confirmed. Cabinet going to start. But to wider point, absolutely. I mean, you know, this is a collaborative and has to be a collaborative approach. So, you know, I think if you know, hopefully you feel that you know, both Farnham Town Council and Wavy are having a voice, making that a contribution to those discussions. But I mean, you know, we're now getting to the phase of, you know, really looking at the detailed delivery of this. So it is important to the point that the Farnham County Council made that you know, that there's that local influence and knowledge that will be helpful to the team. David.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I think Farnham Council, I think, are very committed actually to helping in this way, because I think in the past we've found, you know, we're having to react and correct things too late. It's taking longer to do. I'm thinking the wayfinding project in particular. I mean, so therefore I would hope that, you know, certainly I think I'm seeing on behalf of Farnham Council, we would like to be more positively engaged in this development.
Okay, Chris, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you, and it's generous.
Yeah.
Totally.
Hey, Gemma, you're on.
Hi everyone. So transport models provide a lot of information, and the following slides that we're going to present provides an overview of the results which best illustrate the potential impact of these options. We're using the PM peak as an example because it has the greatest increase in delay with the options. Here is the predicted change in traffic flow in 2025 along key routes from the Sintram county-wide model. The red and orange colours denote an increase in vehicle flow in option B compared with no scheme, and the green colours show a reduction in vehicle flow. Orange and bright green show a smaller change in vehicle flow of within 60 vehicles per hour. It can be seen that the biggest changes to vehicle flow is in the town centre and along the A31. Further afield, there is route switching as a knock-on impact of the changes to the town centre and the displacement of traffic, the majority of which, however, produces a net change of less than 60 vehicles per hour. In the town centre, there is a general reduction in vehicle trips, especially the borough, that sees approximately a 40% reduction. Any increases in the town centre relate to where new routes are available. For example, the westbound carriageway between Castle Street and West Street, which introduces two-way travel in this option along this section. The A31 absorbs some of these displaced vehicles, with increases of up to 15% in the eastbound direction during the middle of the day and during the PM peak. This doesn't occur in the AM peak due to a proportion of longer distance trips transferring to the M3 and A3 instead. The AM peak has these wider rerouting implications as it is more congested than the other time periods. And finally, there is not an increase in the westbound direction due to this route not being impeded to the same extent in the town centre and the capacity constraint of the junctions along the corridor. Next slide, please. This slide presents the same, but for option Y compared with no scheme. As you can see, the vehicle flow different results in 2025 for option Y are similar to option B, with the exception of Woolmead, which enables two-way travel in this option, and thus seeing an obvious increase in trips in the westbound direction, and a reduction in vehicles travelling along East Street due to this section of road being restricted to buses and access only. In the AM peak and during the middle of the day, there are more vehicles using the bypass in each direction, but the differences remain localised. The Syntran model also enables us to estimate the impact on travel by other modes of transport. It is estimated that bus passenger numbers will reduce by a small amount due to increased journey times, although they reduce less in option Y due to East Street being bus only. And the model does show more people will walk and cycle with the options. Next slide. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. You can be back with me because we're now going to cover the more local parameters modelling. So the two sets of modelling are not done in isolation. The predictions in terms of what happens to the traffic that Jen's just spoken about get fed into this modelling, which then predicts what happens at the various junctions in and around the town. So what we've shown here are predicted journey times for the evening peak, so the same time period that Jen's just spoken about. And the plan on the right-hand side shows the journey time routes that we've selected as, I guess, representative of journeys in Farnham, or the types of journeys that some people will be making. So I'm just going to go through each one of these four routes and what the model is predicting. So route 1 is shown in blue on the diagram. That's the north-south route from Folly Hill to Battle Street, South Street, Burger Hill, onto French Road. The model is suggesting that journey times will increase by 1 to 2 minutes based on a new minimum journey time of about 8 to 9 minutes. That's with option B. With option Y, the increases are slightly more than that. Okay, so the reason we're getting these results is a combination of the change in flows and the change in capacity of traffic in the town centre, because we're taking space from vehicles and lanes and giving it to people. So it's the combination of those two things. So route 2 is the route shown in green. So that's from the southwest to the northeast. So it's Recklesham, West Street, East Street, Six Bells, Hell Road, Farnham Road. The model is predicting the journey times increase by around 4 to 5 minutes on around 40 to 15 minutes in the beginning. That again is with option B. And with option Y, the increases are slightly more. If we turn to route 3, which is shown in red on the diagram, that essentially is the A31. So coming in from Hampshire, through Coxbridge, through Hickens Corner, and through Shepperton Block. Models indicating that journey times will increase by around about a minute or slightly less with option B. And those journey time increases will be slightly more with option Y, so between 1 and 2 minutes rather than around about a minute or slightly. And then turning to the final route, which is route 4, which is probably the most difficult to see, that's in yellow on the plan. So that's the Upper Hale Road, Six Bells and Shepperton Flock. The model's indicating little change as far as that journey is concerned between D and B or Y. There is some change, it's a matter of seconds. So that's the picture. So that, as I say, that picture is coming through the combination of changes of the flow and changes in capacity, the two things together.
Can I just check that the modelling includes the right turns at Castle, bottom Castle Street and going out to Wagonham?
Yes, the modelling does include that. And not on the slide, but if we look at the journey from the north down Castle Street and turning right, the model indicates a saving of around about a minute in option B. It's not as big a saving in option Y because there's a bit of congestion in option Y.
So there's just things that we discussed with so that the wider group understand. I mean, I think that when we discussed this the other day, obviously the model assumes that the HGV ban is 100% effective, and we know that it's not. It's still getting 20 HGVs now looking at the whole road. I understand that the model will allow for deliveries, which is fine. None of us have any issue with that. We need access into the town, but the vast majority of the traffic, particularly on the Empire is street traffic, it's something to do with stopping. And I think the other thing that we continue to be concerned about is the wider modelling. If you go back to the previous slide, it's essentially saying that, you know, Gemma's explanation was that people will use the M3 and the M331 instead, and that is just not what happens. When there is congestion in the town, the cars don't divert. It didn't divert when West Street was closed. You know, people didn't learn. You know, even though it was closed for 4 months, and I know the model assumes things will be learned, it just didn't seem to make any difference. So I think modelling tells us a certain amount, but I think life experience living in the town also takes us, you know, teaches us a lot. Those of us that live in the town know what happens when you close particular roads. So I think that there is a balance between what the model predicts. You know, so if you go to the next slide, for example, I think most people would be thrilled if they could get down at option 4 at that time of day in 5 minutes. I don't think that happens very often at all. You know, so I think some of the times it's estimating really well, others it's not, but I think it's a balance between what the model is telling us and what real life tells us from us as councillors, because the model is only a model, you know, and at the end of the day, you don't really have to change something. So I think that we would like to continue to keep a balance between what the model is telling us and what we experience in real life. Yeah.
I don't know, Gemma might like to answer this as well, but I think the model is a guide to help decision making. And I suppose the other thing the model does is generates a lot of information about traffic. And we need to remember we have all the benefits from pedestrians and cyclists. So it almost generates a lot of conversation about traffic. I think we need the balance. I think that's your point. This is a balance between competing objectives. You can be in danger of focusing too much on traffic modeling, but it's a good, useful tool that we have. I don't know if Gemma wants to add to that.
Just that, you know, it's an incredibly complex area, and that's why the transport modelling is needed to try and understand the potential impacts of these changes, and exactly what Chris has just said about it being a balance.
Could I just make one more point, actually? I think the value, as Elaine has reminded me, the value of the models is being able to compare and contrast the options and try to make decisions about the relative merits or drawbacks of different options. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, well, I think we have to recognise that you know, the changes are going to result in there will be less road capacity, you know, but on the basis that that's going to be beneficial in terms of reducing air pollution and making it safer and more attractive for people to cycle and to walk. So I think part of this whole exercise is to try and persuade people to change the way in which they travel around the town. And and I think that we have to recognise that there will be an impact with these changes, and the modelling will provide some sort of guidance. And I think if you were saying, actually, with the models showing that it would be a 30 minutes, addition to the travel, then that would be a concern. But there is it's a bit of a balance between science and art, isn't it? But it's helpful to know that broadly speaking, there won't be significant increases in travel time. But a key part of this for all of us is to sell the wider benefits of the scheme to the residents.
But Jeremy.
Thank you. I just wanted to very strongly support what Tim just said, because I think, first of all, this is excellent modelling, and very, very grateful to the team for doing it. But of course, what it doesn't pick up is how habits change over time. And so the initial reaction might be that you have, 5 or 10 minutes longer journey, but then some people will then not make that journey at that time as a reaction to that. So the reaction over time is generally, I think, that people start to accommodate these changes. So I think it's important to remember that there's going to be an adjustment period. But if we don't make bigger changes, we're not going to reduce pollution in the town centre.
Because I think, Andy, did comment.
Thanks. Just a quick comment that we made, bringing another subject which I think is relevant. I think it will be a time before the active travel really takes full effect in Farnham, because of the nature again of Farnham, because it's a pretty hilly place in the valley. The one thing that would make a big difference, in my opinion, would be if we could introduce at some stage and mini bus service around the town. I think that would make an enormous difference. And that's not currently part of the plan, but I think if we could think of doing that, and that would be an enormous improvement. And it would help reduce car journeys enormously, more even than the active travel in the short term. I think in time the active travel will come in, but it's going to take years frankly before that makes an absolutely major impact. Thanks.
Andy, you need anything else? So the on-demand minibus service DBRT will be introduced in September. So so in September there will be full coverage in Tandridge, Mole Valley, Guildford, and Waverley, and then I'm hoping that from next April the rest of the county will be included as well. So we will have a full rollout. So it is absolutely part of that. Yeah, I personally have a real desire. For me, it is there's got to be part of it. The driving and doing the things we take care for the drivers. There's the cycling, walking, but also we have to be realistic. But unless there is some form of reliable, sustainable public transport, then it's going to be very difficult to persuade some people to change their behaviours. And the pilots involved that has been incredibly successful, particularly where you don't want a car at the other end of the journey. So if you're going to hospital appointments, to the doctors or to the train station, then that's what we would be using it for, quite apart from just doing short journeys around the towns. So that the planned rollout will start in September, and that will be part of that overall sort of transport plan. Okay, Chris, is there anything else on this before we move on?
Well, I was having discussed the various aspects of modelling. We try to go away with kind of clear the mind and come up with a summary, but I think we've all covered it in discussion, to be quite honest. The hybrid option to transform the town centre for people, as they involve taking space from carriageways and creating pavements, or adding traffic lights to help people cross the roads, so inevitably do reduce capacity. And there may be some traffic challenges, but this is about transforming Farnham for the future, creating a better place. And as we've said, modelling only gives an indication of how people react and focuses on impacts rather than the benefits, which obviously will align with the LIP and the LTP4. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there is some evidence from the delivery of other schemes that suggest that people have got a bit more capacity to change their behaviour than is suggested by modelling. But I know you recently had a Wet Street experience, so I'll take that more. We mentioned that aligned with delivery of schemes is what can be done to complement it, to just push that behaviour change and ownership really. So I think that's really what I'm going to discuss.
Okay, so the next steps. So
Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I know something else.
the next steps, as you can see from the team's presentation, option B is the best performing option. So the next stage is, as David Stanker said, is to present to Cabinet a paper to commence detailed design, third option, the town centre, and following a recommendation, hopefully, from Farnham board for the capital spend on this. We've got some ongoing air quality analysis, which will include mapping and engagement with Wavy Air Quality Team, and some initial engagement with businesses on lowering the business activity, already shared with Councillor Martin. Some initial engagement will be early July with the disability groups, Surrey Coalition Disabled Group, disabled people, and Councillor Beaman will be involved in that, and obviously any of the final members who want to come along. And obviously we'll be starting to engage on the car parking provision and the arrangement of Castle Street with on the wall. So I'll make sure that officers and members are included in that.
Okay, so just a couple of points. I think sorry, David, you can post.
Well, I was really just going to go back. I mean, I always assumed, of course, that towns and the car park charges remain at the same level as I assume. And I mean, well, that's Waverley, obviously, of course. But I mean, you could change people's habits by changing car parking charges, can't you?
All right.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Just to cover it, and I think beyond the wider points around air pollution, we had an offer for the Royal University of London to work with us on air pollution issues as well. It was really one to Duncan, and I wonder whether if you're the appropriate person to look at engaging the police and the training standards with the enforcement of the HGV bans. So we know that these take a while to work into the system and to get it planned out as well. But I know from other parts of the county doing some spot checks, because I think you'll find. I think would say that is there are repeat offenders. So I think if we can actually just make that point to them, that would be really helpful.
All I was going to say is that Councillor Beaman speaks for himself personally, but it's also car park.
Okay, good. Right. And I think then we're ready to move on to the other super.
Thank you. So since we last met, the LT work was endorsed by the Farm Board, and the report was from to formal sign off from our cabinet member for transport infrastructure and growth, Matthew Furness. I'm going to pass over to Neil Clare to speak on this amendment. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Elaine. Should we just share my slides as well? I think you have to, if you remove yours. I think you've just got a couple of slides to set the background to what we're talking about. Sorry. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that? I think so. Okay, yes, just a couple of slides just to really set out where we've come from, which Elaine has just touched on, where we are now at, and then where we're heading in terms of the LSWIP programme. So So at the top here, I mean, hopefully a lot of people have already seen this in terms of the step process and the stage process that we're now going through as part of the LSWIP programme. And this is part of a Surrey-wide programme here, of which obviously Farnham Town is part of now the Waverley Borough LSWIP that's now in place, and the other boroughs and districts are completing their plans with a view of developing the high quality infrastructure across the county wide, and then importantly securing the funding to then build this stuff on the ground. Along with LTP4 strategic objectives and carbon reduction and everything that it's trying to address. So in terms of where we're at, so the stage 1 plan is now complete, as Elaine has just said. We followed the DFT LSWIP process, working together with Atkins on the plan here, as we are doing across the rest of the county. Early stakeholder engagement has been completed as part of the early stage, again, very consistent with what we're doing across the rest of the county. And all this is captured within the output report for the LSWIP, which is publicly available now. So within the Farnham plan, which is a slight difference to the other borough and district areas, which was in agreement here. So the cycle routes and the core walking zones that are now being scored using the MCAF, the multi-criteria assessment framework, which is a consistent approach. But the difference here is that we've got the high to low ranking corridor assessment ranking within the Farnham plan, as opposed to a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach that is in place, for example, with Waverley. That's fine, and that's agreed. And in terms of the next step, which we're going to come on to, is then to set the scene for what is that top phase 1 routes we're then looking to take forwards. So just to touch, the concept stage ideas produced for those top scoring routes are available within the LSWIP report. And as Elaine said, the gateway sign off, which takes us through into stage 2 feasibility, is now in place as of earlier this month, where our cabinet member did the final sign off after the Farnham board endorsement earlier. So importantly, so where we're at now, so the stage 2 feasibility design development stage is ready to commence. It's a revenue activity, and this is all about the priority schemes taken from within the plan. Again, the LSWIP itself, there are a high number of routes within the plan that are all part of the LSWIP plan. But over the 10+ year period that LSWIPs are pitched at, along with DFT, there has to be prioritisation here. There's a realism of what we can take forward, and then what we can look to secure funding on the back of this for. So the revenue activity, I'm pleased to say that I don't think this was aware last time. So we have 100k allocation from the strategic infrastructure programme at Surrey County that is allocated to the Farnham plan here, and that's in addition to the money that was already agreed between the borough and Surrey for the Waverley plan. So there's positive news on that side of things. But the key point that we're on to here is the Farnham Active Travel Working Group, which was the agreement at the last Farnham board, in fact, that to now prioritise the routes from within that plan and to select the cycle routes and the core walking zones that we are then taking forward into this stage 2 feasibility activity is the piece we are now at. So action after this meeting is we need to confirm the key stakeholders that are going to be included in that workshop, and then absolutely importantly is to get the data in and move forward with this work to move into the actual feasibility stage. So provisional timeframes here is what we're looking at July, hopefully, subject to availability and confirming the stakeholders we're looking to invite, which we can follow up outside this meeting, with the view that after the workshop is complete, we'll then have the prioritised list of routes. And just as a kind of a scope scale piece here, I mean, the 100k allocation, from what we've known across the rest of the county for the feasibility work that's underway, you're talking about 3 to 4 routes here from that plan that will cover the feasibility stage work. So July, August, we'd expect to then completely finalise the scope of work for Atkins for the commission to commence. So August, September time, we actually expect the feasibility design work to get underway, which then aligns to the Waverley programme of work across the rest of the borough that's in place. I'm expecting for the scale of work here about a 10-month period of work, which takes us up to the June 24 period. And importantly, as part of the stage 2 work, again, consistent across the county, the public consultation on the individual schemes is the part that obviously is absolutely key to making to having the feasible routes and then agreeing, including options in cases where that's relevant. But about midway through the feasibility process, we'd expect to be in a position to present feasible schemes with options for public comment and feedback, to then go back into the feasibility stage to refine the plans and ultimately come up with your feasible schemes at the end of that stage. So just quickly looking forward, and then we'll come back to the key action in terms of the working group. So as we all know, the capital funding to actually deliver the schemes for the construction phase is not yet secured, and that's again consistent across the county. It's the stage 1 and stage 2 work the revenue activities there, that we've got agreed funding in place, and that's the programme that's being rolled out. So the key activity is about progressing the schemes through the feasibility to have schemes ready for then looking to bid for available funds. The list here is sort of the key areas that money is expected to come from. There may be others on top of that, third-party local contributions elsewhere, but these are the key ones. And as we all know, the DfT Active Travel England Fund is probably the main source that we're relying on for the active travel infrastructure delivery. Excuse me. Active Travel Tranche 5 will be the next round. So Tranche 4 was awarded at the start of this year. Anticipation is that Tranche 5, and broadly it's kind of an annual piece from DfT Active Travel England, which will be for scheme development and delivery in the 24-25 following year. So as I say, there are other lists here of available sources and contributions towards securing the funding to take forward the scheme delivery. Stage 4 is the delivery, as we said, subject to funding, and then just to point that the stage 5 monitoring and evaluation, part of the project process, that there is a post-scheme implementation, really to justify and set out that you have achieved the value for money that you set out within a business case when you secured the funding award. That kind of summary, I mean, on a positive note, we've got a signed off plan. We've got an agreed way forward to prioritise the routes through the Active Travel Working Group, and we have the funding to do this. So, I mean, I think that's a positive end, and we'll come back to the working group, but really just to say thank you to Elaine and team and the Atkins colleagues who have worked through the plan, and everyone else who's had involvement. I know it's been a bit of a long slog to get to this point, but, it's positive that we're now ready to move into this feasibility stage. So perhaps if I go back to the slide here with the working group comments. And I think really in terms of key action, it's here in terms of agreeing the invitees stakeholder list to include for the workshop itself, and then obviously getting the date in place. I'm suggesting we'll probably go out with a doodle poll, an online poll, to try and secure availability. It's going to be difficult. Obviously, it's July, it's moving into the summer period, but I am hopeful that we can either get substitutes for people that can't attend, but certainly working towards a July date following this meeting.
Thanks, Neil. I think.
Thank you.
It's great to hear the things that we've done so much since the last time we've spoken with the 3 Surrey County councillors for this area. And it's great to hear that we have 100,000 that's been released. Essentially, because we were not able to confirm this first time the mistakes have been confirmed to us, we have already gone ahead and started to organise 4 area-based workshops, not just to look at priority routes, but also to look at the other issues that were discussed at the last meeting, Neil, as you're aware, which included the constraints, the issues, and the interfaces between the different stakeholders that we also need to make work to be in line with LTN 120. So the first of those meetings we confirmed earlier this week, actually yesterday, as the 19th of July for a meeting at Hale School, and the 25th of July for a meeting at William Cobbett. Those were very much based on being consultation meetings with 3 Surrey County councillors, because we are aware that we have stakeholders that have conflicting views, conflicting concerns, that we need to address to make sure we take the town with us, and we have to balance those things. So I think that we probably need to discuss, because as I said, this is the first time this has come up, and we've been made aware of this schedule. So we will now have to work with you to work out how we integrate the consultation meetings that we still think are important, to identify the constraints that are missing out of the report and the gaps that are in the report, just to make sure that we really deliver schemes that we're, on your last slide, I think it's really important that we deliver the value that we are saying we're going to. And we really want to work with all of the stakeholders in the town, because that first phase didn't include an awful lot of people that were really interested in being engaged for lots of reasons. But we need to give them a voice, and that's our job as Surrey County councillors, to give them a voice.
Okay, so I think, Neil, as you said, we'll take this offline and sort out the things. I think Catherine, you were looking at 4 meetings, so we just need to make sure those are tied in. And then, but I think just will leave you to do that piece of work, and then to make sure that the legal stakeholders are attend a meeting, at least, if that's okay. So Was there anything that,
Thank you.
thanks, Neil. Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, Neil, can you stop sharing the screen? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying. Have I gone? Is it gone? No. Stop sharing.
I can do it.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
That's it for that, I think. So I think that's everything I think on the Alison work. So we go on to the item 6, which is the 831 column.
So it was a package of interventions to address reduced efforts, improve public transport, walking and cycling, and address traffic issues. So strategic outline business case submitted to DfT Farnham Transport on 17th of November 2021. So we have had DfT and Active Travelling review it, scrutinise it, ask lots of questions. And on the 10th of November 22, it's presented to the DfT Investment Panel. It was received really positively. They recommended it for approval. So now it is currently sitting with Treasury, and we were advised that they're considering the overall National Roads Fund message. So we are awaiting the information.
We're not going to work with somebody in Treasury. Good. I mean, I think the main thing is that it's on the, I don't think on the approved or the reducing. I mean, there is obviously other competition with something that we will behind the scenes. We will get away. Okay, anything else on that? No, thank you. Then so we go on to
So really just an kind of an update. We've still got the environmental and cost report drafted by Atkins, but we're currently reviewing the next activity for this.
any comments on those? No, okay, then the Redemption Bridge.
So I'll pass over to Duncan Knox. This.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So this is a presentation on preventing bridge strikes at Breckfordshire. So by way of background introduction, Breckfordshire Bridge was 51 times in 11 years. It's not the most frequently struck bridge in Surrey, that's in Hersham. However, it is the most concerning because, as we know, it's a diagonal across the road. So when high vehicles do hit it, they tend to have the risk of toppling over, and that is a big concern, which you, I'm sure, are already aware of. So for those who don't know where we're talking about, that shows where we are. I guess everyone mostly does. So just a recap of what we've done as a county council highway authority already. We have implemented additional signage on the immediate approaches to the bridge in several locations in 2018 to warn drivers of the height prohibition of the head. There was also signs put in a long time ago, I think in around about 2014, 2015, highlighting an alternative route to avoid the bridge following the black square or black triangles. I think foliage has been an issue in the past as well, and we have done substantial foliage cutbacks in the past. You can see on the left how the tunnel of trees does tend to obscure the presence of the bridge to any drivers approaching it, and a cutback actually does make a difference. We've also invested in new overheight vehicle activated sign equipment. So these signs flash up if a laser beam further up the road detects a high sided vehicle, and the signs flash up to warn of the height description up ahead and to either divert or to turn back. One of the other things we've looked at is the possibility of amending the diversion routes. So there's planned diversion routes for when the A3 is receiving works, or the Hindhead Tunnel, for example. That's when they put out temporary yellow signs on A-frames throughout the road network. And we've agreed already with National Highways and Hampshire County Council that on those pre-planned diversions, that route will be via Hampshire rather than through Redfordshire. But there is those black triangles and black squares and unplanned diversion routes, which currently takes you through Redfordshire. And then if you're a high-sided vehicle, there's another diversion by Echo Bottom Lake. So you have to be fairly switched on in some respects as a high-sided vehicle driver. We don't know for sure if any of these bridge strike incidents are actually associated with the high-sided vehicles diverting from the A3. And we don't have a lot of evidence that it is, but just in case, it's, I think, worth doing. So we've agreed with National Highways that they will fund a change to that unplanned diversion route to go via Hampshire, and Hampshire have agreed that too, so long as the Surrey lead on the design, that will be funded by National Highways. And that's quite a substantial job, with probably something in the order of 100 signs between Guildford and Liverpool to change via Hampshire and implement. So that's not going to happen quickly, but it will happen, and we've started work on it. Some of the advanced direction signage is not strictly speaking correct. We should be showing the height prohibition roundel rather than a triangular warning sign. I don't think that's going to really make much of a difference, but it could muddy the water if there is any prosecution. So just for interest, the triangular warning signs should only be used at arch bridges, not at flat bridges like Redfordshire. It should be a prohibition roundel rather than a triangular warning sign. So we're going to get those updated anyway. This is a long word to say, conspicuousness. But what we're trying to do is make this bridge brighter and easier to see. And we've been pressing Network Rail to improve the conspicuousness of the bridge. And we've got some examples from elsewhere that we would like them to do. And we've been asking them to do this for some time. They have got a road permit for the 3rd of July. So works will be taking place, and we've asked for some more details as to what exactly they're going to be doing. And so far, I understand they're going to be painting the bash beams yellow and maybe putting some sort of black and yellow chevron signs. I don't know to what extent, but what I would like to see is something like this, ideally, and we'll be pressing them to tell us what it is they're going to do exactly. So what else did we do? We've commissioned our colleagues in Atkins to look at what other options there might be. So first of all, they looked at eliminating the risk completely by lowering the road. And that obviously would work 100%, but it is a big deal. It is a very difficult engineering project to conceive of, with structural and utilities under the road. Earthworks, foundations, it's a Network Rail bridge, so we have to collaborate very closely with them, and of course there will be significant disruption during construction. There's an estimated cost of 8.2 million that our colleagues in Atkins have estimated. I think we'd have to have a double check on that, and of course I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a lot higher with such a difficult project, with things like an electrical substation nearby and embankments to the roads, some retaining walls for the roads nearby as well, Wayland Lane, for example. So other options that we're looked at. Atkins considered putting in some perpendicular bash beams on the approaches to the bridge. So that wouldn't stop the bridge strikes, but it would stop the trucks from toppling over because they'd no longer be hitting a diagonal bash beam. To implement that on the south side of the bridge, there would have to be a new footway build out to accommodate that new bash beam, and the foundations for it. And because that would be quite a sharp turn, that would have to result in a left turn prohibition into Wadham Lane, because it would be too acute for most vehicles. And we currently know from surveys that about 500 vehicles make that turn each day. And because it'd be so acute, it might not be possible for larger vehicles to turn right out of that road either. And that would cost about 2.2 million. So that's what it looks at in plan view. So you can see the lilac coloured build out to accommodate this new red bash beam in advance of the diagonal bridge. And there would be no left turn for southbound vehicles turning left into Wadham Lane, because that would just be too acute. What would it look like on the ground? Well, if you have to forgive my childish drawing here, but I tried to conceive of what it actually might look like. And I think it's going to look something like that, which is, you know, a substantial piece of engineering. And I can't even see, I'm not a structural engineer, is that even possible to build something that would stop a container truck traveling at 30 miles an hour from not moving and, you know, not toppling over whatsoever? I think it might need to be braced against the bridge, and that's a network rail bridge. So who would then be responsible for maintaining that? So I think there's a lot of concerns over that, and it doesn't completely solve the problem, in that there will be still bridge strikes. I think there could be problems for pedestrians crossing the mouth of Wadham Lane, because you've got suddenly a great big pillar. Wadham Lane already has a stop line rather than give way, because the visibility is quite substandard to the right if we're trying to emerge out of Wadham Lane. A big steel column there would make that much worse too. And I think some drivers are likely to ignore the no left turn ban. We can put a no left turn sign up, we can try and enforce it, but people will ignore it, and they will try and do a U-turn, I think, via Riverside, as shown here. And as I say, there's about 500 vehicles doing that left turn a day at the moment, and that could have unintended consequences. That road layout isn't designed to take 500 vehicles doing a U-turn like that. So the next option that was looked at was the same kind of layout with perpendicular bash beams, but to try and address some of those problems turning out of Wadham Lane would be to make Wadham Lane at that end one way. So that's what that would look like. So you wouldn't need to have a left turn ban anymore, because any vehicles turning left would be able to swing out right across the width of Wadham Lane without having to worry about any vehicles coming the other way, because it's one way into Wadham Lane if you follow. However, some of the same issues, problems apply, in that the one way for Wadham Lane is likely to displace traffic from that manoeuvre onto other nearby residential roads. So nearly 800 vehicles per weekday travel southeast out of Wadham Lane, and they won't be able to do that anymore because it would be one way into Wadham Lane, and they'll be finding alternative routes on those other local roads. And again, it wouldn't completely solve the problem. It would just stop the HGV beams from toppling over. Another option that was considered was to implement traffic signals for the junction just to the south of the bridge, with the junction with Wadham Lane, and have a perpendicular bash beam on the southbound approach. And the aim of the traffic signals would be so that there would be only one way working under the bridge. So if a vehicle did topple over, it wouldn't strike anything coming the other way. However, that doesn't protect pedestrians who might be walking under the bridge. And it would also, the aim would also to be reduced speeds, but I'm not sure that it's the best option really. There's a number of problems with it. So that's what it would look like in plan view. If a vehicle was to go straight ahead, northbound, and hits the bridge, it's still on its diagonal, they would potentially topple over. And where would they topple over onto? They'd be toppling over onto where potentially pedestrians would be waiting to cross the road, pushing the push buttons across the road and damaging the signal head. Thankfully, no one was actually stood there. So I don't think that solves the problem. And if the lights were green, we're still going to have vehicles heading towards that at 20 to 30 miles per hour at least. And there will also be a lot of congestion and problems associated with that layout too, by introducing traffic signals on that main road. Another option considered by Atkins was to install priority giveaway islands, so the vehicles can only travel under the bridge one way at a time, rather than traffic signals. Again, I don't think that would solve the problem. It would make sure there was only one vehicle at a time going underneath, but if the vehicles were travelling in that direction, they could still hit the bridge and topple over, and there could be pedestrians walking through there. It would have helpfully reduced the speeds, and a 20-mile-an-hour limit might well be beneficial. 20 miles an hour generally is always beneficial, so I think that's worth considering. But that's the layout, and I think there are a number of problems with this, with these build outs here and here, to make it a big wave situation for vehicles travelling towards the bridge. You could only do that if there's good visibility between the two opposing islands, and I think that would be quite challenging over that distance. There's also a problem if you're travelling northbound. If you were to go over to the other side of the road because you find a gap in traffic coming the other way, what if there was a vehicle turning left out of Wadham Lane? You'd be hitting each other head on, and the vehicles coming out of Wadham Lane, the drivers would mostly be looking to the right for any southbound traffic in order to find a gap in the traffic, turning left and suddenly encountering the vehicle going northbound around this island. So actually, I think that's a non-starter. So another option was kind of a combination to have the priority giveaway islands and a ban and perpendicular dash beams and a band left turn. But I think that doesn't really solve it either. So that's what that would look like. I can't see us having those priority giveaway islands. I think they cause too much of a problem, as just described. So what's the way forward for us as a highway authority? I think it's worth remembering, first of all, that legally, the liability lies with drivers who are making these mistakes. It's not the county council who will be taking support for these mistakes. However, of course, we've got a moral duty to do whatever we can and to do whatever we can to mitigate the risk and do what is reasonable. Now, so far, we've implemented a whole range of measures, including improved signage, electronic signage, cutting back the foliage. We're going to be amending the diversion routes, and we're lobbying Network Rail to make that bridge more conspicuous. What more can we do? Well, I think it's problematical to justify spending 8.2 million on lowering the road at one location compared to spending that money elsewhere. Is it worth investing something in the order of over £2 million on perpendicular bridge bash beams to stop the HGVs from toppling over? I think there are a number of problems with those options. It was necessary to look at them, to consider them, but I think because of the problems highlighted in this presentation, I think they would not be worth pursuing because it doesn't completely solve the problem and causes a whole set of other problems. So for me, my recommendations are that we implement the amendments to the unplanned diversion route. We continue to maintain the foliage to a high standard. We make those slight corrections to the triangular warning signs to make them prohibition signs. We lobby Network Rail to make that bridge as conspicuous as we can possibly make it. But I think we should be considering a 20-mile-an-hour limit through there. Now, our current policy requires that with those existing speeds in the order of 30, that traffic calming would be needed to make that successful. But that's not the kind of road where traffic calming would be generally acceptable. And the 325 is with quite a few larger goods vehicles. So maybe a signed only 20 would be a good starting point. That might even be something that we'd be looking at to a greater extent, possibly in the future. I think it's important that we communicate what we've looked at and why we're rejecting those options, because we have a duty to let people know that we find our best and doing everything we can. Michaela, you suggested a pedestrian tunnel through the embankment. And of course, that'd be great for pedestrians and maybe through the share path, that'd be great for cyclists. But it wouldn't, that's a different issue. It wouldn't prevent strikes. And if you could spend a number of millions of pounds on trying to put in a tunnel like that, but you would still have SUVs toppling over, perhaps not long after, still landing on a car, God forbid, or cyclists, or pedestrians who still under the bridge or motorcyclists. So that wouldn't solve the problem, but it is a different proposal.
repaint the entirety of the bridge. I think there's a meeting, meeting with contractors all the time to understand what that looks like. July, yeah, but the work starts on the 5th of July. So that's yeah, as you say, I mean, at the end of the day, this is re-educates the vehicles, the drivers. I know many of those things complicated schemes and there's downsides for you. So I think at the moment, you know, on your list at the end there, cutting back the foliage, you know, looking at the 20 mile an hour zone, policy generally, we'll do in the next few weeks, and then hopefully we will have a much more visible outline to the bridge. I think let's get those solutions, and then I think we'll just have to continue that conversation. But there doesn't look to be any easy solution.
Thank you. I'll be brief because I know we're running out of time. Revolution Bridge is in my Waverley Borough Board. So Tom Horwood, the Chief Executive of Waverley, and myself have been looking at ideas on how to reduce the number of HGVs travelling from the A3 onto the 325 travelling north. Now, the strikes and the toppling tends to be happening in that direction because of the explanation that was given. The strikes also occur when there's no diversion from the tunnel. They happen because of the drivers. So an idea would be to install a sign just before the junction of the A3 and the 325, saying low bridge warning for onward travel, etc. Continue along the A3. However, that junction is Hampshire. So earlier this year, Tom arranged a meeting with Kitty Stewart and Matthew Jessup from Surrey, and from Hampshire, the head of highways, and no less than the director of Universal Services. Representing Waverley was Martin Miles. Now, the idea got some traction and had a positive feedback, and the people were going to go away and discuss it with their colleagues. So if we haven't heard back yet, so if anybody at Surrey can help that chap up along a little bit, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And we haven't got up, so we do Michaela and David, and then
I'll just want to thank Tim for facilitating the meeting between Network Rail and Surrey Highways. It's been greatly appreciated by the local residents. I'm looking forward to the positive outcomes done in this presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a quick one. Has it been exactly raised the height of the road so that it's obviously you can't get through under the bridge?
There was one other suggestion that was made by the community, which was to have a height barrier near Echo Barn Lane. So before vehicles actually get down into the bridge zone, which would actually indicate that they're at the height of the bridge at a much higher part of the road. And I don't know whether that was actually looked at by Atkins.
Anybody else can get bump into
So we've not looked at lowering the bridge. I think that could bring far more spikes.
No, Echo Barn Lane.
No, I was just first point. So yeah, I don't think that would look recommend having a lower Edmonton bridge.
Mhm.
And so you were saying, could you just repeat your, I'm sorry.
At Echo Barn Lane, if there was a height barrier of the height of the bridge, vehicles would be able to turn off down Echo Barn Lane before they got it, if it's one of those flappy ones that you would hit. And that was going to be looked at. That was one of the ones which the residents have raised. So I don't know if it had been looked at.
I have considered that myself. I've been in touch with colleagues in Derbyshire, where they do have height gauges, as they're known, and it's a big steel beam with chains hanging down, so that there's like a clash if you hit it. But those are on approaches and where there are bridges where there is no reason for any high-sided vehicle to go beyond that girder with the chains on it. Here, you may have a reason for high-sided vehicles to go beyond it to deliver, for example, I don't know, John Lewis sofa, or to go to the industrial estates on Wagon Lane. So I don't think we would be legally allowed to put chains dangling down that we know are going to hit some vehicles to prevent them going down there.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we'll don't we can take away those sorts of suggestions, but let's focus on the immediate things that we can do now, and then then let's hope that I mean this is about getting drivers to. I can't believe if there's nothing like signage, and they can see the bridge that they still going to hit it, but we'll see where we get to, but and we'll continue to just explore some of those options, but none of those are particularly. In the short term at least. Okay, we are now just about running out of time. So Elaine, you just want to do okay, everyone's speed management.
We've got ongoing discussions with Surrey's maintenance teams to allow the installation works with planned drainage improvements, therefore sharing the traffic management costs for the scheme. So therefore we're reviewing costs for implementation at the moment. Can I just draw it back just quickly before we finish to the town centre scheme? Am I assuming it's option B that we will agree? So I've got a consensus from the board. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the other option isn't deliverable at the moment anyway. I mean, it would require the purchase of land, and that isn't currently available to us. So we haven't excluded that. But what we shouldn't delay moving forward with the other option. I think that's the general view here. So we'll see where the conversation goes.
Just quickly, just to say that we do want option B designed so that why it could be delivered as part of all media if it became possible.
I'm sure, but that's the open. Okay, good. All right, so. Yeah, anything else on the 31 speed management, so and then program with stuff updates. You'll done all that there.
So just quickly, I'll just pick out the main ones. HGV, we're speaking with Hampshire for additional signage on the approach. Wayfinding strategy, obviously we were impacted by the West Street works for road space for installation, and we're also waiting for network rail and bright roads for actions. The Borelli Park and Stride, we're still waiting until we have the final bridge design, and the Farnham B31 corridor, we're still awaiting the DfT bid. With regards to risk, I don't need to tell anyone about inflation and funding. We have to be careful with scope creep as a risk, because obviously we don't want additional work being added to the programme, and we have to make sure that we're concentrating on the projects within the programme, because the finances are very constrained. And obviously, is managing stakeholder expectations. There's a lot of differing views, and we have to make sure that we manage them carefully on board.
Okay. Thank you, Lane. I think managing risk, but I think there's a lot of work very grateful to everyone, particularly letting members for all the public engagement they're doing alongside work that you doing. So I hope we're never going to have anything with it. We're never going to 100% of you behind. I think but I do think that there is now real momentum behind the work that's being done, and I think that genuine support for that work. So thank you for that. So I think and this is anybody who wants to highlight the key responsibilities. The last item was in fact questions that were submitted in advance. In fact, the answers weren't actually ready until very late this morning. So just to reassure those questioners, the answers will be emailed to them, and they will then put on the website as well. For anybody that wants to see those. Right, apologies for sort of a bit of a rush. Then any other business from anybody? No. Good. Okay. Well, I think we're still making good progress. So lots of work to do over the summer, but I'm not quite sure when next meeting is. It's either September, but lots of activity between now and then. So thank you all very much.
I'm